For most of human history, people didn't even have a word for motivation. We just assumed desire, willpower, and effort were forces of nature, like the wind or the rain. It wasn't until the last century that scientists began peeling back the layers, uncovering why we act, why we stall, and why sometimes even the most important goals can't pull us out of bed. And what they found is pretty surprising. Turns out motivation isn't missing from your life. It's actually wired into you in ways you've probably never noticed. So here's how humans discovered motivation and why you struggle with it. Back in 1938, a young man named Edward Deci was conducting research at the University of Massachusetts when he made a curious observation. Whenever his lab rats would solve mazes to get some cheese, they wouldn't eat it unless he was there watching them. This seemed strange. The rat had worked hard to earn its reward, so why not enjoy the prize? But Deccan pondered this and slowly realized that the rat wasn't motivated by the cheese. It was motivated by the challenge. Once the puzzle was solved, there was no more motivation. Fast forward a few years and another psychologist named Abraham Maslow had an epiphany while looking at a pyramid. He realized that human needs are much like a pyramid, with basic needs at the bottom and less critical needs at the top. These became known as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it turns out that if you don't have enough pizza, sleep, or internet, you're going to be pretty demotivated because these are basic needs. Similarly, if you've got too much pizza, too much sleep, or too much internet, you might also be demotivated since these aren't essential needs. So this is the first reason you might be struggling with motivation. Your needs aren't being met. Now, while it seems obvious that if you're hungry, you'll be demotivated, it's a lot less obvious when your needs are being overfulfilled. Think about how often you mindlessly scroll through social media, even though you know you should be working. Well, this might not be because you need social media. After all, human beings used to go thousands of years without it, and we managed to be pretty happy. Instead, it could be that you want to escape the pressures of work. By scrolling, you're signaling to your brain that everything is okay. You can take a break. This is an evolutionary holdover from our hunter-gatherer days. Back then, stress would often spike when food was scarce. So if your brain perceives that there's a looming threat to your happiness, it will try to help you relax so you can chill out and hopefully find more food. Today, there's still a perceived threat. If you don't work, you won't make enough money and you might die. But you're also facing a new threat from social media. Scrolling seems harmless, but you're actually trading time you could be spending working for likes and comments. In other words, you're swapping survival strategies from chasing food to chasing validation. And your brain is helping you out by making you feel relaxed. This means if you want to improve your motivation, you'll have to actively fight against your brain. And that brings us to the second reason you struggle with motivation. Sometimes your brain simply doesn't think what you're doing matters. According to researchers at the University of California, Los Angeles, the key to motivation is feeling in control. When you don't feel in control, your brain basically says, why bother trying? For example, when you roll a dice, whether it lands on six or snake eyes doesn't really matter because the outcome is random. But if you bet your entire net worth on rolling a six, suddenly it matters a lot. In this case, the researchers peg this on the orbitofrontal cortex, a region of the brain that measures the value of things based on their potential rewards. So, if you want to boost your motivation, you have to do two things. Make the task seem more valuable and make yourself feel like you have more control. But there's a third reason you struggle with motivation. It has to do with the way you view yourself. Imagine you're given a test. You've studied hard, but when it comes time to take the test, you freeze up and fail. You feel devastated and call yourself stupid. From that point on, you start to believe you're just not good at tests. So when the next test rolls around, you don't even try. Decades of research show that this is a common problem. People tend to view themselves in terms of global self-perceptions. Are you a creative person? An athletic person? A smart person? A lazy person? Once you form a global self-perception, you'll always live up to it. If you see yourself as lazy, you'll never accomplish anything. But if you see yourself as disciplined, you'll outperform everyone who thinks of themselves as lazy. And The crazy thing is that the area of your brain that dictates this self-perception is right down here. It's called the prefrontal cortex, and it starts developing during puberty. Basically, the prefrontal cortex makes judgments about you based on your actions and experiences. If you judge yourself harshly, the prefrontal cortex will assume that you're lazy, stupid, or any other negative trait. But if you're kind to yourself, the prefrontal cortex will see you as talented, intelligent, or driven. Now, it's worth noting that while the prefrontal cortex is still developing during your teenage years, it fully matures somewhere between the ages of 25 and 30. That means that if you spend most of your teenage years believing you're stupid, but then spend your 20s being kind to yourself, you can reprogram your brain to see you in a more positive light. It won't be easy. Changing your self-image is hard, but it is possible. Now let's talk about how to change your self-image and boost your motivation. There are 4 things you can do. First, understand that motivation isn't a constant. It's always fluctuating throughout the day. Just like your emotions, there are times where you're feeling great, and there are times where you'd rather just crawl under a rock and sleep. The key is to recognize these fluctuations and plan accordingly. If you know you're energized in the morning, wake up early and tackle your hardest tasks first. If you're sluggish in the afternoon, save your hardest tasks for later. Second, realize that everyone is affected by the time of day. There's a reason late night infomercials exist. They know that when you're tired, you're more likely to impulsively buy something. Even hiring decisions are affected by the time of day. Research shows that companies are least likely to hire candidates during the late morning and early afternoon when interviewers are hungover from the night before. So if you're applying to jobs, schedule interviews either right after lunch or in the late afternoon. Third, focus on small gains. When we look at long-term goals, they can feel overwhelming. To avoid this, researchers recommend narrowing your focus and tackling small wins every day. This allows you to build momentum, which will make it easier to keep moving forward. Finally, fourth, remember that motivation is a choice. Sometimes you just have to push through, even if it's hard. So if you're struggling to make progress, you have to remind yourself of your core identity. Are you a diligent worker? Are you someone who pushes through challenges? Are you the type of person who achieves their goals? If the answer is yes, then prove it to yourself. Push through the challenge and you'll teach your brain to believe in you. Motivation is one of those things we all chase, but almost no one truly understands. For most of human history, people didn't even have a word for it. We just assumed desire, willpower, and effort were forces of nature, like the wind or the rain. It wasn't until the last century that scientists began peeling back the layers, uncovering why we act, why we stall, and why sometimes even the most important goals can pull us out of bed. The strange truth is that motivation isn't missing from your life. It's wired into you in ways you've probably never noticed. If you enjoyed this video, check out the series on how to do literally anything. It's literally everything we know about how to accomplish any goal.